I didn't choose my career. My career chose me when my son with Down syndrome was born over 40 years ago. Here I am, a first-time mother. I expected, I didn't expect confetti coming from the ceiling, but I did expect people to be celebrating, but there was sort of a hushed feeling in the delivery room, and I learned shortly after that there were some concerns about his heart or breathing. The doctor talked about hearts and lungs, and, it was all sort of going, I was barely able to follow all this conversation, and at the end of the conversation, and he said, and there's some evidence of a syndrome, but I just wanted to mention that as an outside possibility. And I said, excuse me, but what kind of syndrome are you talking about? And he said, Down syndrome. But nothing was in place for what I imagined needed to be in place for a parent. So as a social worker, I thought, well, where's somebody coming in to help me with crisis management? Where's crisis intervention? Where's somebody to talk to me? Where's someone to share information? Where's someone to check in on me? And there was nothing. In fact, the next day I asked if I could go visit my baby, and they said, sure, you can walk down Longwood Avenue to Children's Hospital, and when you get there, ask for a wheelchair. He was in a neonatal unit covered with glass, and his head was under glass. He was in this isolette, the wires going everywhere. And I remember, patting his leg and saying, you might not be in the Olympics, but you can be in the Special Olympics. So I had already begun to, create a new vision for him. We were very lucky. The Jewish Community Center in Marblehead had just started infant daycare the year before, so this was actually the second group of children. And I called the daycare director, and her answer was really one of the first positive, wonderful thing that set me on a course to know that the world might be okay, where she said, he needs to be loved, hugged, and fed like any other child, and if the cardiologist says that he's okay, he can come. So at 12 weeks old, he became maybe the first child in the country with Down syndrome to attend daycare. The other thing I decided was from my hospital bed or early on that I was going to change my career. I just started networking to try to see if I could work in this industry and use this kind of energy and use that yellow pad of paper, which I probably still have, the papers of everything that went wrong in the first few months that I was going to change about making a system accountable and available and accessible to families so that no family would have to do what I had to do, which was to sort of create the opportunities. And I was very lucky because I actually came to the Northeast Arc. At that time it was called the North Shore Arc, as the director of advocacy. So is not the perfect position for a person who wanted to disrupt the world? We set up parent support groups and an adaptive equipment lending library and information series and advocacy opportunities, and it grew, and it was a very small part of the organization, and now it's the largest part of this organization. Jonathan was 12 weeks old when he was included in daycare. He was 2.5 years old when he went to a day camp. He was 9 years old when he started going to overnight camp, and at 10 he would go for 8 weeks, always being a typical kid. There are still families who are fighting for what I got, which was an inclusive education for their child. There are still school districts who would rather not provide the opportunities for children with disabilities to have access to the regular curriculum. And so why is the regular curriculum so important? Because that's where information is taught and learned, and the expectations are higher. But it was on this particular trip in Washington where the educators after the trip said to me, I don't know what Jonathan learned, but it couldn't have been more than what he taught us. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, there was an exhibit at the Holocaust Museum that talks about gypsies and homosexuals and Catholic clergy, other people who were also murdered. And we were discussing this, and Jonathan raised his hand and he said, and they killed kids like me. And teachers don't know how to respond to that, because it was such an unexpected, honest expression. And I realized at that moment when I heard that story that there were other reasons for Jonathan to be here other than just to be a wonderful son, brother, grandchild, a friend. He was here because he reminds us of how we need to be better.